I'm Head of the Curve, also known as James Bergman, and in today's video I am talking with Steve McRae, host of the Non-Sequitur show. He enjoys thinking about philosophy and science. He's also an advocate of believing that agnostic atheism is not a reasonable position to hold, whereas I was more on the view that it is a tenable position because it is convenient, if anything, to convey your ideas under that title. But the discussion is far more than that. We go into deeper philosophy and a bit of psychology, a bit of science. Overall, this is a well-rounded discussion about many different topics, but it begins in the first half an hour or so, first hour, and we do go back to it at times, but it is predominantly on the subject of atheism and agnosticism. A big thank you to Steve for letting me come on to his YouTube channel to discuss these interesting philosophical ideas. The link to his channel is in the description below. If you want to help support this channel, please go to my Patreon or my PayPal to donate and to help me get better equipment and things like that. Steve's channel is all about debating and conversations. He has had numerous guests on the channel, such as Lawrence Krauss and atheist Graham Oppy. I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll let you watch it now. Cheers.
All right, you know what? We're going to go ahead and start. I am a little peakish, I guess you could say, today. I'm not feeling too great. I got a little bit of sore throat. Minor cough here and there. Hopefully not dying too much because my trolls would be too happy about that. So I'm just going to do this for maybe an hour, but I have James here from Head of the Curve. He is I would say a student of philosophy, a lay philosopher per se, like I kind of do. And I was watching some of his stuff the other day, and he's actually really articulate, intelligent. Now, he is British, though. You're British, right?
I am British. Yeah.
So you've already got that
10
down.
PM.
Yeah.
It's 10 PM for me at the moment.
The dude's British, so he already has a leg up, right? So anything he says sounds smart, but don't believe him because he's not going to be able to do this, I don't think.
You know, it took a while for me to realize that Hitchin, deity that I once thought him as us had previous experienced, and you know, his Britishness definitely made him sound like he knew, but actually, yeah, his arguments aren't the strongest.
He was a rhetorician. I mean, he did rhetoric, and he was good at what he did. I mean, he did journalism and things of that nature. But he look, you know philosophy. He was a bit of a sophist, you know, and some of his things that were obviously not the greatest arguments in the world, but they were good sound bites, right? Yeah. He
was a journalist after all.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, for what he did, I mean, I give him props. He never really claimed to be a philosopher, and so I'm not going to judge him as somebody like, you know, I would, you know, like Graham Oppy or somebody who, you know, obviously is a philosopher. I would expect to have a little bit more philosophical knowledge than Hitchens had. So, yeah, I mean, again, not one of my favorite, you know, people for philosophy by any means, but I liked his debates. I did like his debates, even though they were totally, I would say,
they're fun.
Yeah, they're fun.
They're very fun.
Yeah. Popcorn philosophy. Yes, pop philosophy. Yeah. In fact, you know, it's funny you mentioned that because I have been using that term lately, pop philosophy, because I see that a lot when people, like for example, they'll just Google food something, right? I have a guy on even Twitter right now, and he thinks he understands things like Gnosticism and Gnosticism, and somebody else, myself, has explained to him, look, these are terms that actually have some usages that have been around for a very long time. I mean, Gnosticism goes back to the 5th century. It didn't refer to any kind of epistemic knowledge. It was an esoteric, divine, hidden knowledge that they believe you had some kind of divine spark and you become oneness with the god, or did the deity, the divine. It was a very specific type of knowledge. But they think for some reason that they can just Google something, throw a screenshot up and say, "Oh, look, you're defeated." I'm like, no, none of this works this way, you know. So.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of something that I actually didn't think about before. I read blog on the Agnostic subject. No, I was nodding my head in agreement insofar as, you know, the kind of diagram with all agnostic atheists, that sort of thing. And you kind of pointed out, well, where in academia is this diagram? And I was like, yeah, fair enough, because I just haven't, you know, I just haven't seen that.
It doesn't exist. I mean, Draper mentions it. Scrapers mentions it that maybe it would be beneficial to have something like that, but there are a lot of issues with it. Not just the fact that the word Gnostic doesn't mean like to know. It means, like I said, a very specific type of knowledge. But if you looked at the logic, right, for the diagrams, I pointed out that for some reason on the bottom right quadrant, because if you start with the quadrants, so the top right is always 1, then you go counterclockwise. So you have 1 on the top right, 2 on the top left, 3 at the bottom left, and 4 on the bottom right. So quadrant 4, as to say, you'll have like agnostic atheism. They always seem to have no symmetry. It'll always be on the top, knows God exists, knows God does not exist, right? And at the bottom, it'll say for the atheist believes God exists, but on the agnostic atheist, it almost always, I think every one I've ever seen, doesn't have believes God does not exist. What it has is does not believe God exists, does not claim to know, which is obviously the case because in order to have knowledge, you need belief, right? So it makes no sense to throw in that about, oh, well, and they don't know. Well, of course they don't know. They lack a belief, but it's ambiguous. And that's my issue with the diagram is because when you say you're just lacking a belief, you're not saying whether you believe that there are no gods or you're agnostic on the proposition. And that's why I think the entire schema just falls apart if you do it that way. And then, of course, if you say, okay, well, agnostic atheism is going to be the belief that there is no God, but not the knowledge. Okay, great. But then it's called atheism in philosophy. It's superfluous to anything as an epistemic modifier. That's my argument in a nutshell. So what have you looked into on that?
Yeah. So I, generally speaking, I call myself historically, well, I started off as a follower of, and then I read all their work.
The new atheism TM, I call it, as been known as.
Yeah. And I read their work. I thought, and I was like, yeah, seems reasonable. And then I read, more classical, Kierkegaard. I read more modern atheists, Oppie, and I realized that there is no philosophical value in the Four Horsemen movement. I think had its purpose. I have an article about this on Medium, quite a brief one, and I kind of said, look, whilst they weren't the best representatives, and they are seriously standing on the shoulders of giants, and even Hitchens admitted that, in fairness, whilst this is true, and they even admit this, they seriously they didn't contend with the real issues, the historical claims and ideas, and I find that the modern literature, in many ways, repudiates New Age. Gave atheism a reactionary, journalistic, as you're saying, feeling to it, and so once I got over the New Atheism ideas and I kind of transcended them, I was like, well, and this is my logic. Now, I want to clarify that my position as an agnostic is it's more so for convenience, because when I talk to theists, right, when I might debate theists to have a conversation with them, it always seems to me a far more comfortable opening if I say, hey, look, I'm agnostic atheist. I'm not an atheist, because initially, the word atheist, to the layman at least, would suppose that you are actively claiming that God does not exist, and you are, by the influence of New Atheism, opposed to it, greatest strength, right, and who hate it, misotheism.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, that isn't actual definition of atheism, but that is what people generally associate it with. And so my position is merely one of convenience. And what I was interested to, when I first heard comment that first left, and then started,
Yeah, by the way, you were very polite on all that. Your responses were great. I wish most of my interactions would all of them even would go like that. I mean, there's a distinct difference between how you react to what I put out, who's somebody who looks in these topics and I'm interested in it, than some of these other people who just by fiat have this Pavlovian response of just sheer negativity. So I was one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. I was like, man, this guy, I like this. Somebody who could disagree and articulate his position is great.
Right. Yeah. No. The feeling's mutual, honestly, because it might be a sidetrack, but once we interacted, I looked at your stuff and I really like it. I watched your a discussion with Graham Murphy, and I really enjoyed that.
He was great.
Brilliant,
man.
He even William Lane Craig. This is really a tangent, but even William Lane Craig, as high as he is on the respect level of even atheists, and obviously, like he when interviewed, I think it was for the Aquinas, but there's a clip where he's like, "Look, the most formidable atheist is probably Graham."
Yeah, I think he thinks
fair enough.
He thinks Oppie's formidable, and I think Alexander Proust.
Yeah. I'm vaguely.
Yeah. Let's see. So okay. So one of the things you said, I was really interested. You had actually said that the new atheist movement didn't really kind of fulfill much, except for this knee-jerk reaction. It did come from 9/11. I mean, that was the response, and so it has served a purpose in a way. But yes, anybody who looks into the philosophy of Hitchens and the rest of them, it's not sound stuff. And I've been trying to sound this warning bell for a very long time. I mean, look, Dawkins is a biologist, and the selfish gene was revolutionary. And I
love that book.
Yeah. And if people want to talk about his biological papers and things of that nature, absolutely no problem. But I mean, I did a little blog on the Dawkins scale because I think it's absolutely crap. I just think it's horrible.
Yeah, it's a bit of a, I don't know, it's a bit of a difficult one. I'm in both camps about it at the moment. Maybe you can sway me, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'll toss you my blog to that particular thing later. But yeah, but this is what the people got used to. They're used to like the firebrand type new atheist. Now, one of my friends, I'm sure you know David Silverman, who wrote a book, Fighting God.
Heard of it.
Remember David Silverman? And he was a firebrand atheist, but even he's kind of like pulled himself back from that approach. I think that time for Firebrand is over, and I think the only people that haven't got the message yet are Aaron Ra and Matt Dillahunty, because they just put out philosophical crap. And again, they've got stature, right? They've got name recognition, and I'm not saying they have not done a lot for atheist communities, but the token is that if you look at them for philosophical knowledge, you're going to be let down. I mean, they're just wrong on multiple levels.
I do want to ask you about Dylan. At some point, we'll get that hopefully. But
yes.
I'm very interested because I have some thoughts on him. We'll wait until a bit further down the line. Anyway, continue.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And then, so as far as like you saying, you use agnostic atheist because you talk to a theist and you think it's I don't know, unambiguated, I guess. But
it's convenient.
It's convenient. But the first question I ask somebody when they say, "Oh, you're an agnostic atheist," and I ask, "What the hell you mean by it?" Because and I'm not joking. I've seen like half a dozen different usages, and then people have these odd stipulative usages. I mean, does it have to do with certainty? Does it have to do with surety? Does it have to do with indubitability? Does it have to do with knowledge? When you say agnostic atheist, what is your position with respect just to the ontological status of God? Forget anything else about when it comes to epistemics. Just my mic is having a conniption fit today. My apologies. Just as far as the ontological status of God existing, what is your position on that?
So I thought I'd write out a description of my position just so it's clear as possible, because I think anyone who has an interest in philosophy eventually realizes semantics and being clear and concise is one of the most important things you can do in the subject. So
I bet I can tell you. I bet I can read it for you. I bet I can tell you what it actually says. Want me to take a predictive guess?
Sure.
Okay. And if I'm totally hosed on this, it's going to be embarrassing. But I have a feeling it's going to say something along the lines of, "You don't believe there's a God. However, you can be swayed with the sufficient evidence. But right now, you don't believe there's enough evidence to warrant the belief that God exists."
Somewhat. There are, I guess, a couple more words, right, that I would use.
All right, go for it. In your lovely British accent. Yeah. This is why he's automatically going to win this, because he sounds smarter than me, and he actually is too. But
I trust the audience to realize.
I got smart people in my audience. My audience is very, very smart. I give them props for that.
So I trust them to spot out any fallacious rhetoric.
Gotcha.
methods I might employ with my British accent. So what I wrote down is, I'm agnostic atheist. Certainly no, not. Though I believe that God probably does not exist. Evidence available. In simple terms, I don't know whether God exists. but I also don't believe it does. It's a kind of, I see it as a, and I know that you've commented on this, and I want your thoughts on it. I currently do it as kind of this middle ground, but I realise that there are some symmetry issues. I don't want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, the first thing, okay, let's parse it out, right? The very first thing you talked about was certainty, right? Why do we ever care about certainty? We recognize that most of the things that we have information about are not certitudes. I mean, we always have the ability to doubt most things. Now, I will admit, a priori knowledge, I'm certain about certain things. Like the law of identity, I'm certain, right? I'm certain that I'm thinking. I don't think that the Cogito actually gets to self, but I think it gets to somebody. Something's thinking, right? Something is doing the thinking. That's as far as Descartes got. Okay,
that's my position. Yeah,
brilliant. You know, many people that I have to like explain that to. They don't.
I mean, it's like it's kind of. I think it's because the phrase is so popular, and everybody assumes that when they take up that position, like, oh, well, there'll be no issues. Descartes said it.
Right.
Descartes. But you know, he's not infallible.
Descartes actually was a stout theist. He actually under the impression that God could not lie to him. God would not lie to him. You know, an all-powerful, benevolent being. So he had a very different type of skepticism. His skepticism involved God wouldn't lie, right? But anyways, you deal with a lot of the contemporary philosophers, like you read Nietzsche and Kierkegaard and Hume and all, and I'm more into just strictly analytical modern stuff. Although I have read some of the older stuff, but
I love Russell.
Bertrand Russell. I've read Russell. I've read Drange. I love Mackey.
You read Mackey. I want desperately. Although one of his books is like £40, and
oh my God, Miracle Theism.
Ugh. Yeah.
Oh, that's the Bible of arguments for and against God. That's the definitive book.
I need to save up for that.
Nobody's ever read the whole thing. Don't worry about it. I've read it piecemeal because that book is massive, but it's great. Who else you want to read?
I was also going to mention John Gray. I actually got into his work. I quite like his style. Have you read 7 Types of Atheism?
Yes.
Called Dogs.
I know the 7 Types of Atheism. I am not too familiar with his work. I remember reading the 7 Types of Atheism, and I was like, yeah, these are just not really what I would consider to be atheism. And I'm trying to.
It was kind of misleading, to be honest. When I actually bought it, I thought, oh, great, he was going to talk about different types of atheism.
Yeah, and it wasn't.
You know, and I was like, oh, okay. But to be honest, I said that I was actually surprised because it wasn't the book I thought it would be, but actually it was a book about types of atheism that we think about history. Mm-hmm. And in that regard, I liked it. I thought Straw Dogs was.
I didn't read that one.
Some people hail it as the magnum opus, right? And I think it's a great book, but for me, it's a bit too big. And I was kind of at the end. I reviewed that as well, and at the end, I was kind of like, well, is he actually going to give what he thinks, or is he just going to write with this impersonal tone? And unfortunately, he rarely gave his own opinion.
Yeah, it was all informative for historical connotations of things. So going back to the certainty thing, yeah. So I don't know why you need to relate to anything about certain, because theists don't go around, generally speaking, talk about certainty, and we just don't, as human beings, talk about certainty that much. So I don't think that's irrelevant. As far as like the knowledge, again. We don't go, oh, I'm a solipsist, and I know that solipsism is true. I know that empiricism is true. I know that, any kind of these philosophical positions, oh, I know moral realism is true. No philosopher does that, right? It's just, matter of fact, it probably wouldn't make much sense.
Not in academia, anyway.
Right. I don't even know what that even means, to say, oh, I know moral realism is true. It's a philosophical stance, not a truth-apt proposition. So when you're adding all these terms, I think you're ambiguating what the actual core question is. It's just, what is your position on the ontological status? Is either God exists, God does not exist, or you have no position either way. Those are the only 3 rational epistemic positions. So when you add all this other stuff in, it's not really telling anybody anything, because I still don't know what your position is. Because I don't know whether you're agnostic that believes neither position, or does not believe either position, or you have a positive belief that there are no gods? Could you say it's probably? Well, yeah, you could be an agnostic and say, yeah, it's probably a little bit more likely there is no God, or you can be an atheist.
It's likelihood for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have no problem with like a Bayesian approach, a probabilistic approach, none whatsoever. But you need to tell somebody whether the probability is sufficient enough for you to warrant belief that there are no gods. So, straight up, is the universe godless?
I think probably yes.
Well, yeah, but they're all probably, right? So you don't even need to throw that word in. We're going to assume we're talking about probabilistically. So if I was to say, is there any gods, you would just say no. And I would be sufficient to me to tell you that you believe none of the gods. Now, the strength of that conviction we can get into, right? How much are you convinced of that? Is it just a belief that you're convinced, or are you claiming a knowledge position, or are you claiming certainty? Those are follow-up questions. Those are great. But at least I know that you have the position there are no gods. Agnostic Atheist doesn't tell me that.
So in a nutshell, what the maybe couple main issues with the agnostic atheist position, what are the kind of highlights that are really just confusing and make it even more ambiguous than it's supposed to try and be less of?
Right. I mean, ask me questions. I could answer straight, direct, and yes or no questions. Like, do you believe in God? No. Do you believe God does not exist? No. Do you have no position either way? Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think the reason for my Semantic, let's say, is because I have had so many discussions, and whether it's kind of like things like this, or just kind of comment sections, or texting, or just with friends or whatever, or random YouTube comment sections, which I don't find time to actually indulge myself in as much anymore. Although they are a bit of fun. But I guess the reason why I like to be pedantic is of how easy it feels than just saying I don't believe in God. Because for me, there are those follow-up questions, and saying agnostic atheist kind of reduces the amount of follow-up. In my experience, the theist is like, oh, okay, well, you're automatically not like you're not a mesotheist. You don't hate
I don't think they jump to mesotheists. I mean, or anti-theists. I don't think they jump immediately.
I found that I don't know. Maybe it's a layman because because it's different in the academic sense, and that's of course what we're trying to talk about here. But I think from my personal experience, I found it easy talking to the average kind of person. Say myself as ignorant, even though I'm fully open to admit that maybe it isn't the most consistent or.
Well, let me ask you this. Something. In the philosophical sense of these terms, from what you've read and what you've read about my work, I'm just going to call it my work. I work hard on it. And one of my papers is on academic edu. Is my explanation of these terms consistent with the academic understanding and the most common usages in academia of these terms?
I thought it was consistent academically. I mean, the modal logic and things like that, I'm pretty bad at math. So the way that you were conveying the message using using the modal logic and things like that is where I struggle to understand rather than disagree or agree with you. And here I wanted to kind of get you to spell out maybe more plain like language in a more holistic approach rather than modal logic. Because I found it very difficult to understand certain things that you were trying to say, and that was only because of my own struggling.
Oh, okay. So on the modal stuff, it's not even the modal stuff. Modals deal with the modalities. In other words, possibilities, necessary versus possible, right? And so my argument even doesn't even do with modalities. My argument, for example, like the semantic collapse argument, is pretty actually a lot more simple than that. What it says is this. In philosophy, theism is generally understood as the position that there's a God of some kind. Okay? At least one God exists. You can have variations about that. You get into like personal, theism. You get into deism. It doesn't really matter to me. I take it globally that you believe there's some kind of deity out there. Okay? Very simple. It doesn't be Christian, Jew. It doesn't matter to me. Just you believe there's some type of God. Now, in philosophy, atheism is the negation of that. The belief that there is no being of God. There's no deity. The universe is devoid of gods. Now, if you have that belief, that means you automatically believe a lack of belief that there's a God, right? One entails the other. It's an actual semantic entailment that if you believe the proposition is false, you do not believe the proposition is true. Now, if atheists want to argue atheism is no longer the positive position, is no longer the position there are no gods, but merely the lack of belief that there is one, theists can make that exact same move. Because they can say, oh, well, theism is no longer the position that we believe that there is a God, but just the lack of belief that there is not a God. It's the exact
right.
same move, right? So if you have weak atheism, you have weak theism, and by the way, both of them are logically agnostic if you do not have a positive epistemic status. This has been proven. I can show you multiple ways of logic on this. Because if you think about it, if I say I lack of belief God exists, and they say, well, yeah, but do you believe there are no gods? Well, no, then I lack of belief there isn't a God, right? And so I'm agnostic on the proposition. I have no belief either way, which is how agnostic is used in the literature. And so I find it to be very disingenuous when atheists default to this, oh, I just lack a belief. Well, so, yeah, but what is your belief then? Do you believe that you're just not justified to have a belief?
Yeah, like theism, I did like it's funny because I did a kind of a 2-minute clip about months ago. I was like, atheist, stop it with your black theism. And because I find it absurd, it's such a vague term, and it almost feels like and it really doesn't look good as well.
What is a dodge? It's a dodge it's a dodge to avoid the burden of proof mostly. But a lacktheist.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Lacktheist is just another name for non-theist, but a little more pejorative because the non-theist is just a set category. You have theist, you have non-theist, right? A or not a. True. I mean, that has to be a tautology.
I find non-theist actually quite an attractive term because it's away from the atheist word, which I feel, as I said before, it just has a bad reputation from the atheist movement and current.
Yeah, they're trying to normalize it, and I think they made it worse. I think
it kind of lost its quality that it once had from the actual academic thinkers, the actual sophisticated philosophers, not only journalists, biologists, but they have their places.
Right. But look at Oppie. Oppie's not going to go around saying, I merely lack a belief. Be like, no, the God doesn't exist. I mean, and by the way, it's so funny because, and you wanted to get back on this about Matt Dillahunty, so here's your chance. Yeah. Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra are both positive atheists. They actually believe there are no gods. And I had to explain this to people who went, oh, they've never said that. Really? Here's a clip of them saying that. Here's a clip of them saying this. I've known them for quite some time. I know what they believe.
Yeah, Matt Dillahunty said he blocked you.
Oh, yeah, they both blocked me.
Didn't they?
Well, here, okay, Matt. I will just be honest with you. Matt Dillahunty is a liar, straight up liar. He totally lied about what the reasons why he blocked me. He said it was some kind of Facebook post that I made where I made it very clear in this Facebook post I was not demeaning anybody's job, and he just completely changed the context of it for his own reasoning. Orange just doesn't understand philosophy, and he blocked me.
I'm not really a fan of him. I've never really found him. I don't know. I just haven't been interested in his work. And talking about Matt Dillahunty blocking people, you're not the only one who's had that experience because rationality rules.
Yep.
Skeptic. Yep. He blocks almost anyone who, and and I want to I don't want to make it a long preface, but I do like Matt Dillahunty. I think that he some worthwhile things to say, and I think that he's a good representative of, I guess, critical thinking in some regard. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of in two minds about that at some points, but I think overall I quite like him. But I must say, they don't call him what Dodge Dillahunty or something like that. Yeah. They don't say that for no reason. I mean, there's a few where be disingenuous, but the stay on topic of the blocking. He seems to block anyone who virtually disagrees with him and puts up a debate.
Yeah,
it's really
that's exactly
jarring because I was like, and it's the same with Jordan Peterson nowadays. I'm not really a huge fan of him. To be honest, I think he's all over the place, disingenuous at parts. But we won't get into that. That's a can of worms. But it's what I found is people's intellectual credibility and integrity really plummets when they download Twitter. Twitter is a cesspit of surface level, low resolution, as far as I'm concerned. Like I think that it really doesn't do anyone any favors. The only reason I have it, and I even downloaded it, I only downloaded it like last month because I was like, okay, I'll give in. I'll just post promotions, a bit like what you do, same kind of similar ethos around. Because I feel like once you start to, get into these exchanges, it really just becomes a contest. Like,
nobody's going to disagree with you about Twitter. Nobody, not one of my. Nobody who listens to my shows will ever disagree with you on this. Okay, this is something we all agree on. Twitter is a cesspool of moronic idiots who think that they can Google foo something and become instant experts. And look, none of us have to be experts on anything to have an opinion. I've always said, as long as you are basically trying to be informed, get into the discussion, talk about it. You learn from getting things wrong. My audience corrects me all the time. I'm like, all the time. If I do something wrong, they'll pick up on it. I guarantee it. Do I block them? Hell no. I thank them for it.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, for example, I talk to, and I hold the exact same position in the regard that somebody doesn't have to have a degree necessarily or whatever to have an opinion and to say something that's logically true. I mean, I had Apostate Prophet. You're probably familiar with him.
Name sounds familiar.
He's kind of an ex-Muslim atheist, and he posts a lot of kind of controversial content around atheism. And some people would say that he's a bit too reactionary or disingenuous. I don't personally believe that, but when I on my channel, right, and before that I had Hamza Dorsis on, a really cool guy, one of my favorite Muslim intellectuals at the moment, and I had him on, and then I had like loads of Muslims saying, "Look, well done, like good job, we we like this, really good conversation, really critical conversation." Have Apostate Prophet on, who is an ex-Muslim, okay, a couple of weeks later, then people say, "Oh, why do you host this guy? He he's a liar and he's disingenuous." So you know what? 99% of the comments, to be fair, right, 80%, 90%, maybe 85% of the comments like that, they didn't have any shred of refutation, any shred of argument against anything that he said throughout the 2 hours that I talked to him. All they said, as if a claim is evidence in itself, of itself, they were like, "Oh well, it seems to me that listen to arguments rather than be so convinced that somebody's going to be a priori wrong just because they might have said something, or their content might be at times a bit be sympathetic to that view, maybe a bit too reactionary."
Yeah, well, they don't have the skill set sometimes to really express. I had the same problem many times. I've had a guest on where I'm like, okay, this part, he's making sense, this is correct, and some other parts maybe not so much, and people would just crap all over even the parts that are actually being said correctly as far as my understandings. And I'm like, okay, if you think that he's wrong and I'm wrong too because I'm agreeing with him, give me a reason. And a lot of people just don't have the reasons for it. All they do is parrot what they've heard. I mean, that's one of the most dishonest approaches to a discussion I've ever seen. When all you're going to do is parrot what you've heard Matt Dillahunty say. Right? I mean, that's not an argument.
Yeah. I want to go more into what you think about Dillahunty, because I've got a few things in my head, and I know that you have a lot to say about him, and I'm just really interested in in your kind of, I don't know, maybe highlights of your criticism of him. That would interest me.
All right, straight up. Okay, so here's the thing about Matt Dillahunty. He's a personable guy. However, his ego is bigger than his philosophy understanding. He's an egoist. He is definitely he's into his image more than he is about facts and things of that nature. And of course, he rode that train for Atheism Plus, which just, I think, was a worst thing that ever happened to atheism. And he got bit by it. I mean, he literally got bit by his own movement that he's part of. I don't know if you remember the whole thing with the free thought blogs and with PZ Myers, and they all got woke, and people were telling him, "Hey, look, these blogs here, they're just a bunch of woke people, and There is no conversation. There is no original thinking. There is no room for any kind of disagreement. And he's like, oh, that's nonsense. And he goes over to the 3-flop blog, and he goes under pseudonym. And he starts, talking to people, and they all start like ragging on him and bitching at him and degrading him. And he comes back on his Matt Dillahunty account saying, hey, look, I was just seeing what this was like over here to see if what people were telling me was right. And they said, oh, you had a sock account, and they kicked him from the boards. They kicked Matt Dillahunty from his own thing that he had, been promoting, the free thought blog. And so he got bit by his own wokeism, and this is true. If you guys remember, this
I do find the atheist experience, and I do quite like that. Although a lot of the time, I'm just wondering, clearly just made logical fallacy and missing this guy, theist, for the wrong thing. I find that constantly. I watched a clip with Jonathan McClatchy, who I quite like.
I liked him. You had McClatchy on.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy.
Dude, I went out to lunch with him in Long Beach.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I know McClatchy very
awesome.
well. Yeah, he's great.
Wow.
He is a. I mean, I don't know a lot about the theological stuff that he talks about because I don't have an interest in it, and it's way over my pay grade. But as far as philosophy, him and his wife talked, over lunch for like hours talking about this stuff. So nice. I'm a big fan of McClatchy. Yeah, like I said.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, and basically, I watched a clip, and it's actually on YouTube. I think he's probably done it a couple times, maybe 3 times. There's one clip in particular where he called in, right? And I don't know what it was. I know one was about the resurrection, maybe one about something. But I remember is he was talking to Tracy, and Tracy, I was surprised because a pretty good thinker. She's pretty eloquent and things like that, and was completely dismissing Jonathan actually out of the things that the wrong things, because I was skeptical of things it was saying. Then Tracy was straw manning him,
which is unusual for her. Tracy's one of the most solid thinkers, I think. Tracy has some,
which is why I was so surprised. I honestly was, because I was just sitting there like I really would expect more. Quite disappointing, but he was at the same. I don't know if you watched the. I guess now it's maybe an infamous debate between McClatchy and Dillahunty. And did you watch that?
I have not. I know of it.
The one where McClatchy. I would recommend watching that. It's kind of a train wreck. How messy it is. Regardless of whether I agree with McClatchy and what he was saying at that moment, and whether I disagree with Dillahunty. Okay, let that to the side. Dillahunty was effectively insulting him, and doing what he blames his callers for doing to him. He was doing that to Jonathan McClatchy.
Yeah, he's dismissive, and look,
it looks
jarring. Bad for him. Yeah, no, and I take those things kind of personally too, because, like I said, I know Jonathan. And my big thing is this: when I have an interlocutor, I like to talk to people that actually believe what they believe. Right? I don't like pose. I don't like dishonest agents. I want to talk to somebody. One, maybe we can change their minds, kind of stuff, or two, at least you can learn something. Right? These people that actually believe what they believe. And Jonathan is a true blue believer. I mean, straight up. And he, when he talks about Richard Carrier, he sounds like he knows what the hell he's talking about. Okay, again, I don't get any of that stuff, but the people that I do know about theology would probably agree with McClatchy more than Carrier when it comes to mythicism.
McClatchy called his work a train wreck in the discussion that I had.
I listened to parts of that, and I remember McClatchy was not a fan of Carrier calling it a train wreck. Yeah, and he's probably right on that, because again, I don't know too much about that area. But to dismiss McClatchy out of hand, and you know what? I'll be honest. I made that mistake once with McClatchy years and years and years ago. Let me tell you why. A lot of my old viewers may know this, but I used to have PZ Myers on, and this was before he went so south on the woke end of the spectrum to become just somebody nobody should have any interactions with. The dude is just mental. But him and another PhD person I knew were, not fans of McClatchy. And McClatchy was just prior to making his PhD biology, and McClatchy was saying some questionable things about some genetic stuff about having a gene in situ that was able to be reactivated with the Gulab pseudogene. And I read some of the stuff, and I was like, yeah, this is not making much sense. And I was thinking, man, these guys are right. This guy's just some whack job theist who, kind of almost like a creationist stuff. Before I got to know him, right? But I talked to him about his work, and he explained it in a completely different way from they explained it. I'm like, oh, okay, at least I could see your point on this. He's like, yeah, I recognize that it probably wouldn't work, but it was just, a hypothetical kind of thing. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And he was a nice dude, and we've just got along ever since. So I made that mistake before of prejudge, kind of judging somebody. But Matt's just dismissive as shit. If he knows that you have more knowledge about something, or you're going to out-articulate him in an argument, he is going to have that wall come up, and he's just going to be very belligerent, like a bull in a china shop, and try to demean you as a person rather than the argument. He's done this. This is a shtick, though. He has a whole show called The Hang Up. Well,
yeah, I mean, it seems almost self-evident then. Have you watched his, relating to this, have you watched his debate with Jordan?
Yeah, actually, a friend of mine was there at live. Ozzy was.
Oh, really? Nice. Yeah, that would have been quite
Ozzy
something.
Got to ask
I find that
yeah.
I find that is one of the most. That's actually one of my favorite entertaining debates, just because of how how both of those guys are really wanted to debate. Because I feel like Harris isn't strong enough against his claims that he sometimes makes, and I've watched that debate between a number of times. And when I first watched it, I was like, Peterson got absolutely destroyed, completely destroyed. And then I've watched it, right? As I've watched it, reading more and thinking more, watching Dillahunty, I see that numerous times throughout that discussion. Now, again, independent from whether either is correct or false, what they say, but there were numerous times in that discussion where Matt Dillahunty tries to completely shut him down, right? Completely shut him down. And then 2 minutes later, right? 2 minutes later, he actually admits that, okay, fair enough, because I think Matt Dillahunty, for example, said that the smoke sensation argument, saying like it can, the psychedelic drugs, it can help smoke sensation, and Hunty was like, something like that isn't evidence. Don't take my word for it, but it was something along those lines. And essentially, and this happened numerous times throughout the debate on different topics, but Matt Dillahunty did all his rhetoric. He did all of his rhetoric, and then because Peterson was, credit to him, quite good in spotting it, and disputing it, actually was, oh, okay, yeah, because he's in front of an audience, right? If it was Twitter, it would have been a different situation.
Well, people get eviscerated on Twitter. Yeah, the thing where I think it went really south, Ozzy had actually asked Peterson a question about what he thought an atheist was. Great question. And I think there was a very specific reason why he asked that.
As Konov, apparently.
Well, if you remember what Peterson said, he related to Dostoevsky, right? He related to the brothers Karamazov.
I sometimes feel that's the only book he's read.
But it bothered me because I never read the book, but I know what it's about. You have this character, protagonist named Ivan or
Fantastic,
something. Yeah, he commits a murder and he feels guilty for it, and Peterson's like, oh, there's going to be a god because it shows a conscience, versus somebody who doesn't have a conscience, blah blah blah. But his description of an atheism to me was more related to a sociopath versus not a sociopath, or a psychopath versus not a psychopath. It wasn't had anything to do with the ontological status of God. It was trying to relate a moral question, right, and moral philosophy to what is an atheist. But the question should have been in the ontological domain, and he was making it into a moral question, which I thought was a very disingenuous answer.
Yeah, and he's done it repeatedly, even though he's been literally called out on it numerous times,
as well as he should be.
It's just a disanalogy.
Yes,
to say that. Just a complete disanalogy, kind of, because as you say, the picture that he was painting was as if Peterson has this a priori belief atheist must be serialism, must be immoral. Which, look, fair enough that there's a justification, but doesn't then follow definition immediately that they're immoral or commit crimes, violence.
Right. Well, what would he accept? Oh, what's a theist? Well, a theist is somebody who has like Jim Jones or a cult leader that uses religion to alter the minds of people. Stuff like that. It's like you said, it's disanalogous. But even better, if you really want to watch a great debate with Matt Dillahunty, where I give him full props, where he kicked ass, it was with Saitan Burdicate.
Okay.
And Sai's going to be on the. I've talked to Sai recently again. He's making the rounds again. He has some personal issues, as people may or may not remember. But Sai and I go back a ways. And he's going to come back on the Non-Sequitur show to talk about presuppositionalism again. Sorry, guys.
Nice.
Yeah. But the debate that he had with Matt
destroyed
him. Just eviscerated him because
presuppositionalism. It's one of those views that to me feels like it's quite literally the definition of begging the question, the definition of secular reason.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely circular, and it's look. I'm all for properly basic beliefs and faith-based commitments, but I disagree with Plantinga wholeheartedly because Plantinga holds that God is a properly basic belief, and my question is how? It doesn't meet any of the single criteria that I would hold what a properly basic belief even is for. I mean, is it? Do I have to have it? No. Well, mostly when you have a properly basic belief, they're non-revisable, they're non-justifiable, they're non-wordable. They're on pains of circularity. Right, so if you try to justify it, I mean, how could you justify the use of reason with reason? It's circular.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I don't need God to have a presupposition to do anything. I mean, should I do it as a basic belief? Sure, but not properly basic. It's not foundational. And they're trying to say that. I had a guy on the show the other night where he was a flat earther, young earth creationist, presupposition apologetic. It was
I give you both for that.
Yeah, trifecta.
I give you credit. I give credit for having that kind of patience. Yeah.
So I just think it's very disingenuous when somebody says, "Oh, well, you have to assume a God to do anything." No, I have to assume certain things. Sure, like reality. I have to assume there's even a reality there to even discuss anything about it. Even to rationalize anything about reality, I have to assume there is at least something to rationalize about. Right? I mean,
you have to have some kind of value, which. I think this is a difficult topic at times because, theists often say, okay, well, why trust rationality? And I want your response to this. And I kind of turn around and say, but look at the consequences of not trusting rationality. Like, because theists often ask, oh, what's your epistemological foundation and things like that. And under atheism, it can be difficult to justify and to discuss. But I kind of, something that I like to conceptualize is I don't need to know the mechanics of how a car works in order to drive it. The sense of, if something works, right? If I survive, and I know truth isn't directly correlated with survival, fair enough to that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
That's a worthy distinction, a very important distinction.
False beliefs could be survival mechanisms as well. That's
exactly like metaphorical truths is fine.
Absolutely,
I love that. Yeah, I love.
You're one of the very few that actually even knows what the hell that even is. So I'm that's why I love philosophy people rather than some of the other people I talk to, because you ask what a metaphorical truth is, or a false fiction, false truth. What do they call it? Fictionalism or Photo's work. Photo had, if you remember, Fodor. Can't remember how to pronounce Fodor, the biologist. He actually would talk about what's selective for, and sometimes a false belief could be selected for evolutionary purposes. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, if somebody was running up to you, right, with a knife, would you act as if they are innocent, and would you act as if be okay? No. Even if that belief might be false, it of course gives you that advantage to react as if they are trying to hurt you.
Right. Exactly. So I mean, I don't have everybody is, I used to kind of say, oh well, I want as many beliefs that I have to be true as possible, but I've kind of stepped away from that because I want my beliefs to be justified more than I even do want them to be true per se, because I could believe something, and if it is true, it could be very harmful to me, right? I mean, so I would rather have some of my beliefs be false, and then, oh look, I have a false belief now, and then when I know the truth, then it would obviously would be the case to be true, but.
See, I guess I want to ask you something about this. With me, I find it difficult to easily dismiss things that are true, and kind of believe that or act as if they might not be. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm concerned with what is true, and I feel like if I deviate from that, if I kind of betray that quest and that sincerity for truth, if I act if certain things that I hold to be true are not true, I feel like I'm lying to myself, and I'm being personally to myself, to my philosophy kind of endeavors. I feel disingenuous to myself. What do you think about that? Do you think that we can? I think no. It's more of a personal issue with me. How do you navigate that?
What do you mean? Like,
so believing in something that not acting as if something is true because it might be harmful. For example, I guess the question would be, I guess there's a lot of contingency, but some people would say, oh well, they'd rather not know that they're going to get cancer or cancer and die, right? And would you be one of those people? Maybe this could help discussion in this context, but would you be one of those people who would like to know, or would you be one of those people who wouldn't?
Yeah, that's a good question. By the way, I know you wanted a one-on-one. I did put the link in. Your friend Melissa, she's been on your channel, right?
Yeah.
So did she join? Do you care?
Yeah.
Okay. So I put the link for her to come in. All right. So I think yes, I would like to know only if I could get something out of it. Like if I knew I was going to die tomorrow, I don't want to know. I don't think I want to know. I would rather just it happen. Just like if something's bad is going to happen to you, there's that that long wait of then you have anxiety and you have stress. I'd rather just have it happen, right? If there's nothing going to be done about it, if nothing can be changed, if there's nothing I can do to get out of it, then yeah, I would probably go under the ignorance is bliss kind of thing, and I wouldn't want to know.
Because that's something I'm really. I find there's no right answer to this, but I feel like on a personal level, I'm more inclined to face those truths all at once and face up, right? Like a bit like Nietzsche, right? I'm really inspired by Nietzsche's mentality in that regard. Really admire him for facing truth, actually admitting that atheism's implications aren't very bloody good. And I really admire his honesty. And it took quite a lot of pressure.
What are the implications? I mean, obviously, Nietzsche was, I would put under definitely many different forms of nihilism. If there's just nothing to life as far as value, which I disagree. I think that we do have intrinsic value. I think that we give existentialism would give we give our own selves our own value, right? And it is, I think, an intrinsic quality. But that doesn't mean that trillions of years from now, something's going to matter. It's not. I mean, the reality is that trillions and trillions and trillions of years from now, when there's all a bunch of black holes, nothing's going to freaking matter, which is depressing because I thought about this extensively, that one day all the art that's ever been created will be gone. All the music that's ever been created is going to be gone. All the cultural things that I find to be spiritual, because when I listen to something and I have a spiritual feeling, not related to the supernatural, but just, a sense of well-being and a sense of just awe and wonder and, the beauty it took to make some of these just amazing pieces of art and musical compositions, it's all going to be gone. So what's the point? So to me, I think the point is we live for now. We live for now.
Yeah. And of course, that's where I guess people like Peter jump on that opportunity to say, that's the problem. That's the problem with atheism. It's kind of encouraging you to live in present and not care about responsibility. I mean, I don't
have a problem with that.
Although I think that it's got. I think that the tone of which that's said is the issue rather than the point itself. Right. The point is true, but it's not found. Just I guess
it doesn't really give you the entire gist of things. Let's say atheism is true, and by the way, this is an important point. The only way atheism can be true is if it's propositional. Psychological atheism and lack of belief atheism cannot be true or false. Atheism can only be true if there is no God. That has to be a proposition. That's when we say theism is true if God exists. Atheism is true if God does not exist. This makes a nice symmetry. So the lack of belief atheists they don't seem to understand. It makes no sense to say atheism is true unless it's propositional. because you want it on the cycle. You want it on the status of God existence. You don't want it based upon if somebody has a mental state or not. That makes no sense, because now atheism
is kind of irrelevant as well. It's kind of irrelevant and arbitrary to the actual question at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say atheism is true. There is no God. What then? Well, okay, then obviously there are other things like possible, what do they call it? What's Nick Bromstrom's simulation theory, right? I mean, there could be like a simulation. There could be something afterwards. There still could be some kind of supernatural thing after we die. I mean, but generally speaking, most beliefs don't exist in a vacuum. So people that hold there is, God doesn't exist is probably going to say, look, after you die, it's just like annihilationism. There's just nothing. You go back to the way it was before you were born. Okay. If that's the case, then I'm okay with that, because look, I'm not going to be aware of it anyways. It's better than suffering, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't stress out about that.
What do you think about the? I've heard before, and actually, I think it has some intuitive. It makes me think. Get your thoughts in it. What if a theist said to you, "Well, think about the probability of you existing," and I would even say, in a vague sense, consciousness is a miracle, because it's nothing like anything else. It is a very
it's absolutely
sensation and ontological foundation, right? So what would you say to the idea that, well, because the fact that we have all of this and that we're here, consciousness, okay, so put that on. Why don't you think the afterlife could be the same standard of miracle, i.e.,
there definitely could be something. Like, look, I tend to what's called property dualism, which is not like source dualism or substance dualism. Okay, so property dualism is basically the position that you have a physical substrate, and then from that physical substrate, you have a mind. Okay, so you have the mind that comes from that supervenes on the physical. Are they two different substances? I don't think so. I think that maybe at best it's what's called neutral monism, where you have one substance, and out of that you have physical and you have mental. But the fact that mental stuff even exists, that's one of the things I will check in the theist column. I really would check that more in the theist column, as far as it is so beyond our understanding that why something is allowed to even have consciousness based upon because pure physicality, you would have to have something like panpsychism for it to make sense, right? Which is making a resurgence, but then you have these little particles called monads. So you have actually a particle of consciousness, right? I don't think I can wrap my head around that, but
neither can I.
Yeah, I don't get into the panpsychism thing, but I definitely think that because we have such a complexity, a way of apprehending the universe, the anthropic principle, at least the weak version, that we are even capable of understanding the universe, it's something that actually weighs against atheism.
Yeah. I would probably agree with that on an intuitive level. Like, I think there is some weight to that, and I don't think it's given enough credit either, because people like Dawkins it feels to me that he takes it all for granted.
Yeah, I think they don't realize how difficult it really is.
I think that's because he hasn't actually read much philosophy. I mean, what do you think of his memes as well? Because as far as I'm concerned, it just feels like another version of Jung, and then Jung can even be traced back to Aristotle. Is the meme idea really that unique?
You mean Gene versus memes?
I
know Dawkins.
Archetypes. So Jung has his archetypes. Dawkins, and many people have kind of conflated them together.
It's the genes versus memes thing, right? I'm not that familiar with his meme. Was it memology? I don't remember what he called. I've looked into it before. It's above my pay grade, because, like I said, I think it goes back to earlier philosophers that he got it from. But I can't even weigh in on that. I just have a very tertiary review of it that I did a very long time ago. And people hear, it's funny, they hear the word meme, they think they're talking about like, what you find in a Facebook group. It's like, no.
Yeah. Well, Dawkins, that's
where it came from, though. I mean, I was just the term, yeah.
Yeah, which when I think about that, I'm kind of half the time when I think about that, I'm just in credulity. Richard Dawkins was the
Yes.
coined meme.
He did. Yeah, because these are supposed to be like evolutionary things that are passed down through society, societal type concepts and beliefs and things of that nature. And look, there's definitely a comparison. I mean, I think that we are by nature a result of not just biological evolution but social evolution as well. Clearly, I mean, if you and I were born, just even 100 years earlier, we would be vastly different people. Our self-identity would be vastly different.
Sure, I mean, there's this. It's funny because I've studied forensics as well. I don't know if you're familiar, but we have primary school, secondary school, which is high school essentially, and below that as well. But then we have college, then we have university. College is kind of the one before university, and that's what you kind of do. I don't know what you. Right, I find it difficult to compare the US and UK systems. But anyway, I did forensics for science, applied science, and instantly the teacher was like, versus nurture, and I was just at that point. I was just like, why are we having this conversation? It feels self-evident to me that it's obviously a bit of both.
Yeah.
And I felt, I don't know, maybe it's just me being pedantic once again.
No,
but I was just
people just want their dichotomies. They want
exactly.
Black and white
I was just so jarred to hear this teacher genuinely asked that question if had that both.
I've seen the same thing with empiricism versus rationality. I'm like, why isn't it can't be both? I like empiricism for certain things, obviously with science, and I like rationality because I think reasoned logic is an amazing tool that we have at our disposal. But they're different tools for different things. And I
agree, and I think
one or the other.
Yeah, and I think I also when a theist asked me, okay, but how do you have an ethical system for atheism? Like, okay, look,
value virtue ethics.
Utilitarianism has its issues, right? And getting categorical imperative and things like that. Look, they all have their place, but what I constantly have to say is, why don't we just take the best out of some things about utilitarianism, some concepts out of the categorical imperative, and why can't we also look at history and say, hey, look, that wasn't very useful. Let's probably decide not to do that anymore. And it always feels that the theist at times doesn't want to realize that you can mix things together. You
Absolutely.
can look at history, utilitarianism,
consequentialism,
consequentialism. That's it. Yeah, consequentialism. Well, and
deontological theories, Eric theories. I mean, there's no one size fits all when it comes to moral, and moral theory is not an easy topic. It's just not. I do tend to moral realism, and I wrote a little piece on what these terms basically mean in literature on the average, right? Because a lot of authors use terms differently for some strange reason. So, like, if you look at moral, for example, moral subjectivism has multiple different uses. Moral relativism has multiple different cultural moral relativism has multiple different uses. And so, there's no one size fits all. But I think in an atheist that there is no God absolutely can develop a very strong moral framework, and it can be objective as well if you want. I mean, again, these are philosophical positions. They're not absolutes.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's kind of a I don't know what it would be called. Kind of just a complete lack of open-mindedness. Even suggest that we should do one over the other. Or another.
I say appeal what you want.
Black and white fallacy sort of thing. And also, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say real quick, appeal to whichever moral theory you want. I tend to more what's called value pluralism. I can pick and choose anything I want, and I think that value pluralism is probably a way to go as far as normative stuff. Because again, you have meta ethics, normative ethics, applied ethics, and so do I have to hold to virtue ethics all the time? No, but I think that in most cases, you could probably make an argument of what is the moral thing to do based upon the virtue being the middle ground between two vices. I think that most times you could do that. If not, then appeal to some other form of morals. But the point is, you're trying to be a moral person, and I think that you don't even need a categorical imperative. What you could use what's called a hypothetical imperative.
Yeah, and that also is subject to the cultural context at that time. Like, again, the theist, and I promise I'm not trying to strawman the theist here, but from my experience, they follow on from the previous thing, saying that oh well, culture changes. How are you gonna what are you gonna do? And I'm like,
relevant to me.
Pay attention.
Well,
bloody attention.
It's irrelevant if cultures change, except that it should change. And Emily does want to say something. I'll get her in, if you don't mind, just for a second. I don't want to make, obviously to take over. But here's when it comes to cultural stuff. I have the position that certain things are wrong. Okay, these acts are morally impermissible. For example, slavery, morally impermissible. And so when somebody says, well, in the context of the historical nature back then, they allowed slaves to happen, even in the Bible, with the Jews, or with the antebellum period, and before that, the slave traders, all these things. And I would say to those people, look, in my moral view, it was always wrong, but they just didn't recognize it. They didn't have the epistemological understanding, the knowledge of the act being wronged. So you cannot just say, oh, culturally, they weren't committing any immoral act because back then they thought it was the right thing to do. No, they always were committing a moral act. They were just not aware it was an immoral act. They didn't have the knowledge of it. That gets into virtue epistemology, but that's why.
Yeah, and I would want to go more into that with you, because at the moment I find difficulty in finding where the foundation. And I want you to elaborate on this, like where the foundation is for assuming that things are absolutely morally reprehensible, like slavery being objectively principle and things like that, and this kind of follows on to one thing that I actually do like from Dillahunty is his analogy. I don't think he made it up, to be honest. His analogy with chess.
He got that from Harris.
It's Sam Harris.
That's Sam Harris's analogy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't impressed with his moral landscape, by the way. But
I tried to read it years and years ago. I'm going to try it again, I think, but because when I first tried to read it, it was before I even really got into moral theory, and so I probably.
It's interesting. I did actually enjoy reading it. I just didn't find it. Well, at the time, I actually did find it reasonable. But then when I learned a bit more about about the subject,
I get the idea behind it, and actually I do kind of agree with it somewhat. You have to remember that moral absolutism is not the same as moral objectivism. Moral absolutism is the opposite of moral relativism, right? And so moral objectivism is the opposite of moral subjectivism. So you can have moral absolute or moral relativism and still be an objective moralist. The thing is that the objective moralist just believes there's at least one moral truth that is always the case. And it doesn't depend on your belief, my belief, or anything like that. It's not the same as moral absolutism that says it is absolutely something you must always do normatively. So there's a difference in those descriptions. So as a moral objectivist, to me, it is always going to be the case that if you have unimoidia, which is what some Harris is talking about in his literature, that if you want to have benefits to society and reduce harm, then for human flourishing to happen, you can have an objective moral framework. Because if you start having things like killing all the babies, if you start having things like slavery, if you have things like torturing babies for fun kind of stuff, all these things harm societies, and if they can be objectively evaluated that way, because all the societies that ever have them are harmful societies. They don't flourish.
So
that's a hypothetical case.
Slight devil's advocate. So being a slight devil's advocate, there are hypothetically though, could you not argue that they could be economically and socially successful, provided they were under the opinion that all of these things were actually.
But if your goal is, that's if your goal is going to be economic wealth, right? Unimoidia is not necessarily related to wealth, right? More wealthy countries tend to be, you would think, be more flourishing. But look at Saudi Arabia. That's a wealthy country. Would you say that that's, they're one of the most leading, egregious countries in the world as far as human rights violations, right? You wouldn't want to live in Saudi Arabia, even though they got a lot of freaking money. So it's not really based upon wealth. There's a lot of other factors, I think, into it.
Sure. So what would your definition be? I should have asked this initially, but what would be your working definition of? I don't know what word you use. It was on the line.
Eudaimonia?
Successful.
Eudaimonia. It means human flourishing.
Yeah, because to me, I find that just trying to think of what the theists would say to that, and from my experience, they would kind of say something along the lines of, "Who decides what flourishing means?" Because if Hitler was deciding what flourishing means, then it wouldn't be a very good situation.
Yeah,
what would you say to that?
I think it's a false move, though, because
okay,
I mean, first of all, they would have to defend Hitler's actions. I mean, we all have, and again, this is going to sound corny, but I do have a strong belief in what's called intuitionalism, right? Intuitionalism. I think that we. I
don't know if I buy that. By the way,
I know, and it's controversial, but I think that most people do have an innate understanding of right and wrong. I think that most people, I mean, because again, what do we talk about with morals? We're talking about right and wrong actions, right? And so when we're talking about things like, like the Holocaust, I think that sure, people can make the argument, well, his subjective evaluation was that, that he should, kill all the Jews and all this other stuff, invade Poland. He thought it was a great idea. But objectively, right, we can see that from other countries, if you have a worldwide geopolitical a place that we all abide, that's not going to be beneficial to the world. And so that is the objective standard to me, is how is this going to be beneficial?
Why would it? What's your definition of beneficial in it to clear things up?
Well, not killing 8 million people. I mean, again, I know,
but that can be beneficial if your goal is to do so, and for some reason you had this plan somehow.
That's what a hypothetical syllogism is, right? Goal oriented, right?
Sure.
So I agree with you. I mean, again, but that's why if you have to decide on what your goal is, and sure, I agree with you. If your goal is to do that objectively, that would be the beneficial thing to do. But is that really what we're talking about when it comes to morality? I don't think so. I think it doesn't capture what we actually are talking about in moral dialogue, and I think that's the problem. And because again, it's sloppy. Morals are sloppy. I mean, the only thing I think more difficult than moral theory is philosophy of mind, which we were talking about earlier. That subject is hard. I mean, if somebody can explain
quantum mechanics, although that's well, I don't know. It could be concept.
Well, I don't know. Have you ever read Penrose's theory on orchestrated objectivism? Orchestrated.
I haven't actually read that. I like him though. He's a great mind. I haven't actually read anything by him yet.
Yeah, look into what's called orchestrated objective reductionism, and he was using quantum mechanics years ago to try to relate them to what's called microtubules and consciousness, because consciousness may come from some kind of quantum mechanical effects. It is possible. It's not outside the realm of science for that to happen, because I mean, again, and then we'll bring Emily here in a second, but to me, the most amazing thing about that is if I have a thought. Most people would agree thoughts are abstract. There's no concreteness to a thought. There's no hyperstantiation to it where if I have a thought, all of a sudden there's something that would going to be materialized. It is abstract in nature. It's phenomenological, that exists only in the mind. It does not exist external to the mind. And so if I have this thought that I want to do something, like I'm going to drink coffee, but I'm going to raise my cup, how does that thought get actualized? How does a material change in the universe where I move my cup happen if a thought is abstract and it has no potential to do anything? That's like saying, hey, the number 2 moved my cup. Right? What does that even mean, right? So
yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, I wondering if the math and the theoretical, like the abstract idea of numbers and stuff like that would be, if you could conflate that with the mind. And I think in a vague sense you can, because as you were thinking, like, of course, numbers are abstract and so is the mind. And I'm just kind of thinking, is that maybe a disanalogy or not? I have no idea.
Well, they both exist.
I feel like maybe there's something missing. I don't know.
I mean, even a mathematical Platonist will say that the numbers exist in some kind of mathematical realm, right? Of an abstract nature. And even colors. I'm a color realist. I don't think colors exist. I think they're all phenomenological. They have nothing to do with energy levels. They have nothing to do with wavelengths. I remember the other night I had a dream and there was green lasers. I remember green lasers. I saw the color green. It has nothing to do with the wavelength of light or energy deposited on my retina that my brain's processing. This was completely a purely phenomenological event that is just an abstract thing. So consciousness.
Think it could be memory?
Well, sure. No, I believe most dreams do come from like memory things and your subconscious mind. But still, I didn't need a light source. I didn't need energy put into my eye to see that color. So it is just something that exists completely in an abstract space. All right, real quick.
That's an interesting, juxtaposition between not having any receptivity of your eye to visual kind of.
It doesn't relate to something in reality. It relates to only something that exists in the mind itself, rather than I look at something and there's a causal connection. I mean, if you look at like a causal theory, if I see a tree in my brain, I see an image, right? But my image is only a reproduction. It's only just basically what I'm processing, what I think I'm seeing, right? This is one of the issues with direct realism. Are we processing what we're actually seeing? Now, yes, there's a causal relation. There's a tree. My brain sees something. There's a causality there, but we have to assume that our cognitive functions are reliable enough that what we're seeing is something that is actually in the reality. Now, I think that we don't have direct realism. I think that most of our existence is in our own head, and I'm tending a little bit more to idealism more than I ever thought I would ever look into. Lately,
I do like it. Yeah, no, it is. I really do like phenomenology.
Yeah.
I recently read Blue Ponty's. Wow, I can't remember his. Blue Ponty's book. I'm probably mispronouncing that, by the way. He's French. It's phenomenology of perception.
I know Ponquier.
I could probably look behind me.
It's okay. But I don't. What was the argument that I get Emily?
I want to recommend it though. Oh, there we go. Maurice. Yeah, that's it. Maurice Merleau-Ponty. Phenomenology of perception. Been wrote it. If you haven't read that, I would really recommend it. It's a beast of a book.
They all are in that genre.
It's really is a beast of a book. It took me so long to read, and I barely understood any of it. But what Ponty was saying at one point was it was really similar to what you were trying to convey there, which is, and his example was the phantom limb, right?
Yeah,
and believing, having the sensation that
your brain is experiencing it, right? Exactly
right, and that reminded me of what you were saying there about phenomenology and the relationship between mind and the body. It's a really, really deep book. I would highly recommend it if you can stomach all of that.
Because you talk about these different topics, do you get a lot of trolls?
In and out, I guess. When I was referencing my video on Agnostic, it was theism. Now, me and you agree on that topic, that it's a vague and evasive term, right?
Yes.
And the comment section was a lot of the comment section was all wrong, and none of them, again, it's all personal attacks,
Well, because I don't think there's a way to out argue that. I mean, they're just not using it the way the literature uses it. Two, I'm sorry, but if you've never even heard of things like Presumption of Atheism by Flew, if you haven't read anything, if you don't know who Oppie is, if you don't know who Mackey is, I don't think anybody should be talking about atheism to somebody as far as, oh, you're wrong. You're not in a position to say somebody's wrong if you don't know anything about the topic. I mean, you at least have to know the very basics about something in order to establish that you have some knowledge about a topic to determine and weigh in that somebody is wrong if you're trying to correct somebody. I make sure when I say somebody's wrong, I get my facts straight, right? I mean, I'm not going to tell a PhD is wrong on subjects I know absolutely nothing about because I know nothing about them, right? But if I've had people where, they were educated, but, they made a mistake. Let's say it's a math mistake, which is objective. And I pointed out, and they go, oh, okay, and they fix it. Why? Because math is objective. But a lot of the people I notice that are weighing on these topics to say, oh, you're wrong by fiat. Atheism is by definition this, and this. And they don't understand that definitions are descriptive. They're not prescriptive in nature.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing as well. Like, appealing to the can be a bit of a messy task, because it seems that the dictionary is the definitive
Yeah,
decisions
authoritative.
of what words
Right.
mean, but actually, it's the dictionary, and words are a progressive sort of thing. It's not this objective standard. I mean, words change, right? I mean, in gender, for example,
Women has now
years
been
ago,
changed. The word
yeah,
woman.
yeah, like all of those things, they change, right? And whether we agree with that or not, we have to admit that the issues are far more complex. Saying, "Hey, look, you're wrong word because somebody 300 years ago said it was this word," it requires more
Well, yeah,
detail
yeah. Well, like
and thought than that.
the Oxford, the Oxford Dictionary (OED) is a diachronic source, means that it actually explains word usage over a period of time. Most other dictionaries are synchronic, meaning they're giving you the word in a general parlance in a very, very broad way of how it's kind of understood, but it's not going to give you any specificities of that word. It's not going to tell you how that word is used in any kind of domain of discourse other than just general usage, because most words are polysemous. So, I mean, look at the word theory. If you go to a science convention, they're talking about scientific theory, people are going to know that's a well-substantiated model that makes accurate predictions and that explains things with explanatory power. They understand that what that means. But you go to a creationist, seminar, and they're talking about, evolution is just a theory. They're meaning it as a guess, right? Because words have usages.
Yeah, the whole evolution theory, and it shows that there's been any real research done, because as we know, that the scientific theory is of course different from that we might use every day. It's something that's consistently tested, and again, that is it's a very amateur mistake to find in some. Well, yeah, it could be, although it's a bit too much on the nose.
Well, how is that any different from when an atheist says, here's a dictionary that says atheism, the lack of belief that God exists, and I say, well, here's a dictionary, atheism, the belief that there's no gods. Which one's the authoritative one? Neither. Both of them are just giving you how words are used. Now, this I go by facts when it comes to some of these things. The normative usage of the word atheism in academic literature, by far, I would say 99% or greater, is the positive epistemic stance. It is the belief, the view, the theory, the dogma, or the creed that there are no gods. Any paper you go to read on atheism, that's what you find. I have not, to this day, remember finding any paper that it was a university level that didn't use it in that way. Now, Flew argues he wants it used in the negative in his 1972 paper. Smith argues that, and Martin argued that. All three are no longer with us. The only extant one still with us is Bullivant, who argues that, but he's a theist. Not to have a genetic fallacy, but he's a theist that argues for that. So most atheists that are philosophers, I don't see going around trying to describe atheism in the negative sense, because people that really do look at the philosophy say, no, this makes no sense to do this. It is dishonest, because a theist could do the exact same move. Kawasa 5001 says, but most changes of a natural process, not through intentional brainwashing, in my opinion. Yes, matter of fact, they have found that words, when they do have different meanings and usages, are all because of just organic changes. If you try to force usages, it doesn't take in society. There's the whole thing with the pronouns, the z, zim, zer thing. They're not taking.
Yeah.
Because you can't force people to do that. It just has never worked. It all has to become organically. But when people pull out a dictionary and they're not understanding that a dictionary is just telling you about a descriptive, a general descriptive, and not how it's used in the domain of discourse of like philosophy or atheology, like you said, they haven't done their research. And it's so dishonest, because then you say, you ask them, well, what do you know about atheism? Oh, it's just lack of belief. Well, what else do you know about it? Oh, that's all it is. Oh, okay. That's like saying to a mathematician, what's math? Oh, 1 + 1. Oh, that's all you know about math? Okay. Good luck with that in Calc 3,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think majority of people hold that. Maybe might be a layperson, which that's fine. But the reason why they're not corrected on that is because there's no one around them to correct them on it, and the literature that hypothetically might read to get that impression of atheism is the new atheism opponents, who
Matt Dillahunty
proclaim themselves to be brights.
Bright. I haven't heard that term in ages.
Yeah. A bit on the nose.
Well, yeah, I mean, because Arn and Matt have, a pretty substantial following, people are going to take what they say by fiat and not question it. But I can tell you, the people that have questioned it, they are a lot better interlocutors to theists than most general people. Matter of fact, most people in my audience that have adopted the more philosophical understandings, they're formidable. They're the ones going into the theist, say, hey, look, there are no gods. Let me explain to you why. Oh, sure, I can justify my belief. Blah, blah, blah. They're not interested in just showing the theist up. They want to promote, hey, look, there are no gods. And more importantly than that, because again, I don't really care about the status of God existing or not as much as secularism. I want separation of church and state. And if there is no religion, then that automatically happens, kind of, right? If God doesn't exist, and that actually is, is evidence that, we wouldn't need a non-secular society. But for atheists just to sit there and go, oh, I'm just saying to the theist, I lack a belief, I'm not making any claims, then you're not doing a goddamn thing to promote anything. You're not helping anything. You're not doing a damn thing to explain to anybody philosophy. You're not helping secularism. You're not helping humanism. You're just being a putz going, I don't believe you. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not here. I'm talking to James. We've been having a dialogue now for 90 minutes. Why? Because he's not sitting there going, I don't believe you. Right? He can have a conversation. Be like James.
It's like when Matt Dillahunty... be like James. Not in every regard, though, I hope. Like what he's got, the Jungian shadow. I love Jung. I'm going to ask you.
I don't do much with the continental philosophies.
Yeah, I like Jung in the sense that he has some interesting ways of thinking, but I'm not too impressed with his. Or I don't want to degrade him in this woo woo kind of claims that he.
Did you accept the archetypes? The Jungian archetypes?
I think they're reasonable. Whether I think that they, I think they're useful conceptualizations, and I don't think I really disagree with them. I think his archetypes are good work. I also liked his book Answer to Job. It's a very niche book of his. All people need to read, but I found that to be quite interesting to defend actually. Story.
Yeah, I think the archetypes are. I mean, they've always tried to categorize people and try to have a reductionist approach to say, okay, most people are at least going to fall into one of these types of categories. Matter of fact, what's the I cannot remember the names, but remember they have like the 4 letters to it, right? IEP, whatever. What the hell is that called? I don't remember the name of the psychological assessment.
Myers-Briggs?
It could be. There's a psychological assessment where you're introverted and extroverted.
Oh, so you don't mean the J? No, it's not that you.
What's like JETM or IDTM? I don't know. There's like all these different personality types, and I
don't. Yeah. I think that's the Myers-Briggs.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
They always want to reduce people to like a certain type of general thing, and I think that most people. I think there's only so many things to go around. So I think Jung probably makes a point on that. I mean, you're going to fall into these types of people. Like for myself, like right now, I'm falling into a caregiver position because my roomie's not feeling well either. So I've been taking care of her. So not that you have to always be in this type of position, but I would fall into that one type of archetype just temporarily. Well,
the biggest problem with psychological personality tests are that our personalities change. That's the biggest issue. And
I don't think they're fixed, right? I don't think people.
And exactly, fixed, right? And when people do these tests, the rest of their life they're like, "Oh, I'm an integer. I can't even remember."
Right.
And the thing is, I've done these tests numerous times, right? Different kinds, and I've had different results.
Oh, absolutely.
Within like half an hour of filling one out. It's
yes.
It's not something to put all your eggs in one basket.
I 1,000% agree with you.
But people treat it as if it is, which for a guide, I don't know, to be consoled, to have some existential security that you're like this person. I'm on Kierkegaard's side here. Labels negate. I'm completely
Yeah, no,
they're helpful, but I think they
you make a point there, because it is the MPTI test, and I think you're absolutely right. You're not going to be locked into one of these things. They're fluid. I can tell you right now, the person that I am now, even though there's some core things that are the same, is completely different than it was a decade ago. One, obviously, I got more into philosophy. I mean, 10 years ago, I was so philosophically naive. I was that guy thinking philosophers sit on a freaking sofa, smoking a cigar, drinking single malt scotch, which I did do actually. I enjoyed that. Yeah, dude, I had some good scotch the other night. And so, I mean, I was like, what the hell is the point of philosophy? Then as I started learning about philosophy, I'm like, holy crap, this is the foundation for everything. This is how you think. This is reason.
Yeah, philosophy for me, I think people, whenever I say to somebody that I like philosophy, that I like reading it, I like thinking about it, it almost feels that they draw a blank and they're like, but what actually is? And I find it, and I want your input here, because I think the way that I conceptualize philosophy, so on a basic level, I think anybody can be a philosopher. I think there's a distinction of
Yes.
scholarly philosophers. I think that needs to be out there. But I think on a basic level, everybody can be a philosopher, but on a more on a deeper level, of course, to be a philosopher in a scholarly level, you need to prove your salt there. But I think philosophy is all about how to reason and how to think.
Yeah.
How to think effectively despite your biases. And I think that's why I like psychology so much. I'm agreeing it as well, because part of me couldn't actually decide which one I wanted to stick to, and both. I try and do both now. But I think psychology is a lot like that. I mean, anyone who studies psychology is almost guaranteed about them that they want to understand themselves.
I think we're the same boat. Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you on that. Absolutely. I think philosophy is how to reason, how to critically think, how to understand, how to apprehend the universe and make sense of it. I think it's the foundation from which all other things are kind of grounded. Matter of fact, fun fact, if you go to Wikipedia and you type in any word you want, and if you go to that word and you take the first hyperlink in the body of the description, not like what it talked about the Greek or anything like that, but the first word in the body of the description, you find the first blue link and you click on that. You keep doing that over and over and over again. No matter what page you start with, it'll always come back to one single page, and that one single page is philosophy. I shit you not. They've done it with crawlers. It's
an interesting thought experiment. I like that.
I've done it numerous times. I think the longest it took me, was maybe 20. It's not that much as you think. Let me know when we get done with this. Go to Wikipedia and try it.
Well, and this is something I kind of put in conjunction. If you think about it, everything like science was philosophy. Literally everything can be boiled down to in the origin of history and things like that.
It was natural philosophy.
It can be, natural philosophy. Like that, it can be boiled down to philosophy. Because I think the main reason why I like any other things, I am more interested in what I don't know opposed to what I do know. And that's probably why I'm graduating philosophy. I'm just so intrigued what I don't know yet.
And I do think that you're right about anybody can kind of philosophize and be a philosopher, just like anybody can be a lay scientist, right? It's a home scientist, right? It doesn't mean you're a professional scientist. It means you understand the scientific method. You're able to devise an experiment. You're able to execute the experiment. You're able to get results, make predictions, do testabilities. Look. Most people in my audience has probably done some kind of scientific experience in their life, right? And that exactly what it would be to be a home scientist. I used to build stuff all the time. Hey, what happens if I put this coil here? What if I put this capacitor here? What if I change the resistance here? What those are experiments, right? And I always loved science. I've been science all my life. But then I realized that without philosophy, science is useless.
Exactly, because philosophy advises you how to think about your science.
Correct.
And without any indication, any guide in how to, how to go from the is, which in this case is the science, what is, in this case, the ought is, and without without the ought, the is just standing alone without effectively arbitrary.
Right.
So people like to pretend that philosophy is dead.
No,
They pretend that it's pointless.
They misunderstand what he said about that, though. The Hawkins said that. That's not what he meant, though.
Yeah, I mean, well, people like to misinterpret what scientists say and twist it into some kind of theological defense, such as Einstein. A lot of people like to say that he was, but actually, he was just very unfortunate in how he was. His language, very lyrical, very lyrical, and kind of like to use the word God in conjunction with nature.
Well, he would be more the God of the philosophers or the Moses God. He believed there was no God with extra, like the biblical God. He would not have been a but it comes back to the whole with science being regulated by philosophy, that nature. It's so weird when I hear somebody who's really into science just hoops on philosophy. I'm like, then you really don't understand. You cannot do science without philosophy. It's just not possible. And so it's really disconcerting when I see scientism. Like, there's no such word. Yeah, there is. There are people that think the only way to acquire knowledge is through science, and that's not the case. In fact, science can only do so much. What science does is it observes a natural world and gives us a naturalistic explanation. But science cannot answer certain questions. It's not even designed to. It can't. It doesn't have the tool set to do it. The most fundamental questions to be asked is, why is there even something to even observe? That's not a scientific question. That's a philosophical
question. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Kawasa 5001 says,
like people like Krauss write a book like Universe Came From Nothing, which I'm actually doing a. Me and Hamza, sources who I talked, said me and him are actually collaborating to do a debate review of Hamza's debate with Krauss a few years ago.
To review my discussion with Krauss, I talked to him about that very thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I talked about the
Krauss, I didn't know that.
I had a discussion with Lawrence Krauss on the what's called the Hartling-Hawking no boundary proposal and Gould's no free lunch.
Was it recorded?
Yeah, it's on the Non-Sequitur show.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh cool. Yeah, I'll check that out.
Yeah, just look up Lawrence Krauss on the Non-Sequitur show, and it's so funny because Lawrence Krauss has done a lot of interviews, but when we started talking about the nuances of the no boundary proposal and how to get to time equals zero using the dimensionalities, the science involved in it, his eyes just lit up. He's like, oh, hey, this is going to be an actual cool discussion. You could see it in his face. Because I was trying to ask him involving interesting questions because I read his book ages ago and then I reread it for the interview. And so it wasn't like, oh, can you explain nothingness? It was like, okay, let's dive into the whole energy and the, how energy affects space-time and things of that nature. Yeah, I think it was a really good discussion. Krauss was a very, very congenial guest.
Yeah, I think Krauss, in his debate with Hamza, he was probably his worst point because he was very condescending, Hamza, and essentially Hamza outlined all these premises, syllogistic arguments, had 5 different points, a bit like William Lane Craig actually, when he played here, and he, both of these guys thought about what they were doing, their opening statement, they had multiple point arguments, premises, so on. And like Hitchens did, Krauss did as well. He literally just walked on, basically dismissed more or less everything Hamza said. It didn't even go through individually claims. Yeah,
because he finds that
it was only in
scientism. Krauss falls directly into scientism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, but which is my issue with it. Same with Dawkins to an extent, although Dawkins, in some interviews, he seems like that, but also not. It depends on the day.
R. has the same problem. He falls so much into scientism that he just gets so much wrong because he refuses to update his box. He refuses to append things he thinks he knows that he's completely. When you have a bunch of people that are well educated in a very specific domain and they're all telling you, hey, you have a fundamental misconception, it's highly likely you probably have a fundamental misconception, unless you're some kind of savant. If you're Feynman and you're correcting your professors, then okay, then I get that. But most of us, especially us being lay people, we're going to have misconceptions. We learn these things on our own accord for the most part. But he has been told so many times he has so many fundamental mistakes. And in fact, he did an interview with a young creationist, which was kind of odd because the young creationist was a philosopher who was really on point about his philosophy. It's Dr. John something. It was so bad that even Anthony Magnabosco was sitting in the back going, "Oh, Aaron, just stop. He's just stop." He's just trying to argue, well, humans are apes by definition. And the philosopher was like, yeah, but that's just a category. There's no necessity for that categorization. It's an arbitrary categorization based upon properties we have for the elements in that set. And he's absolutely right. But he's like, but Aaron's like, no, it was a necessity that we are apes. It's like, no, Aaron, that's not a metaphysical necessity. It's just a consequence because we in the set that we describe what we have as an ape. We are apes, but then again, we also have brute animals, right? If we talk about brute animals, then we usually take humans out of that, right? So we talk about apes in a colloquial sense. Humans are not apes, but when in biological or monophyletic sense, we are apes. And he wasn't as rapid as hanging around this. He's like apes. We are humans by definition. It's like, stop saying by definition. You're automatically lost when you do that. Real quick, I got a super chat.
Running around in circles.
Oh, it's so annoying. Well, like he's like this. He would always say, like, reality is real by definition. That's not an argument. It's a tautology. It certainly isn't. It's not an argument.
Yeah. You said you had a super chat, right?
Yeah, Kawasa 5001. It says, if you think about it, a child's first interaction with the world is that of an inquiry, asking questions, trying to figure out things, ain't it? Yeah, most of the time, obviously. Now, there are certain things that we were never taught. Those are properly based.
It's only when we grow into an adult that start to tell us that we shouldn't think about that stuff. Children are very open-minded and very, there's a lot of wonder there. And what I didn't like seeing when I was in school was so many people kind of dismissed, very imaginative people dismissed because they couldn't do, stuff they would be expected of from the outdated schooling system. And it's very unfortunate when those kind of curiosity-driven people are turned away. But I think that's the system in general.
You know how many geniuses have probably been out there and never got a chance to really thrive? I mean, even Tesla. Tesla died of poverty. He died in poverty. You know that? I mean, he was one of the greatest minds of our time. People don't recognize.
Well, Nietzsche was barely read.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
It's a shame too. Like, my dad was probably not one of the smartest guys in the world. I'm not going to say he was, but when it came to certain things, he was really skilled at it. He did architecture work, and he did drafting, and he has like multiple patents. So he was able to conceptualize things, take it to a patent attorney. They were able to make a patent out of it, and he became a CEO of a company that he started. Very, didn't have great business sense. I admit that.
But you have to give credit where credit's due.
But he knew nothing about math. He knew a lot of people just kind of underestimated him because he wasn't formally trained in this stuff. But he just had a very amazing gift to draw and draft and conceptualize things. So if I think that would have been utilized more, if he would have been able to get to a good architecture school and things of that nature, he would have had probably a name for himself. But I think a lot of people have a lot of innate talent that's just never developed.
They do.
Yeah.
They certainly do. They certainly do. Like there's so many times when I've talked to somebody, and you see how passionate they are, right? And then they're doing a subject that is completely the opposite of, and then asking them like, okay, but clearly you have passion. Why aren't you pursuing it? And the answer is, well, their parents, economical stability, which fair enough. If I completely see that.
Make money off
at the same time, there's so much potential that. Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? Run a philosophy shop? That's the common thing, isn't it? I also wanted to ask you about Neil deGrasse Tyson's philosophy. He was once asked, I can't remember what question it was. It might have been with Dawkins actually. But basically somebody asked him what he thinks of philosophers, and he said, "Well, a philosopher is somebody without a lab." Philosopher who's a scientist without a lab.
I disagree with that. And the reason I disagree with that, because science deals with empiricism, right? And so when you're looking at observational, you're looking at just things that are a posteriori, you're just taking away other things that are like a priori knowledge. You're taking away things like rationalism. He's basing everything about experiments. Philosophy isn't about experimentation. Philosophy is about thinking. So you don't need empiricism to be a philosopher. In fact, I think most philosophers nowadays probably tend to more rationalism. But throughout the histories, there's been this long two things. Which one's which? And then you had, I don't know if you read the Two Dogmas by who wrote the Two Dogmas? Was it Quine? In fact, I just had a tab on it the other day. I was trying to read through it again. It's not an easy read. But he even argued that basically they're almost the same thing to some degree. But I think that when he's saying that philosophers are scientists, I don't think that, because philosophers are not about experimentation. Philosophy, at most, I can say, look, if you want to test a hypothesis by argumentation, then yeah, you're doing some kind of psychological experiment. You're doing some kind of mind experiment. You're testing out a hypothesis. Matter of fact, one of the reasons why I tell people atheism should be the belief that God does not exist is because as an ism, ISM, it makes it propositional. It can be tested by argumentation, whether God exists or not. It cannot be tested via science, right? There's no empiricism in the world that I think can be developed. One, because science just adheres to methodological naturalism, because it can't even address the God claim. But there's no scientific thing that you're going to do. There's no experiment that say, hey, let's show if God exists or not. No, it's outside the purview. So I just don't think he's right on that. And I also think that he's disingenuous when people have asked him, well, does God exist? And I think he is an atheist in every sense in the word, but he defaults to agnosticism because it's expedient for him to do so.
I don't want to belittle Neil deGrasse.
Oh, I think it's genius.
With all of his qualifications,
I'm a huge fan.
I completely admire him in that regard.
Yes. Doesn't mean he can't be critical.
But at the same time, he always comes across to me more of an entertainer rather than somebody who, giving answers that may be.
But that's his thing, though. He's an educator, right? And he does these pithy little things, and that's his shtick. And you know what? I applaud him for it. I like it better than Bill Nye when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I mean, I'm sure if you sat down with Neil deGrasse Tyson and you wanted to know hardcore black hole theory, he's gonna
Oh, that would be cool,
right?
Be great. I'm really interested. Probably one of the. Yeah, that's. Have you heard of the theory? I'm pretty sure it's not even it's more of a hypothesis of white holes.
Yes, of course.
Heard about that?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I haven't.
Instead of everything having space-type curvature where everything falls in, white holes you can never enter a white hole. Everything is being expelled.
Exactly. Because I wasn't sure if it's accepted whatsoever, but I remember reading about that.
They're mathematically possible, but they've never discovered it. But
interesting.
Just because it's mathematically possible doesn't mean that there's going to be a reality. Math and reality don't have to match, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, logic in itself demonstrates that there's a difference between premises can be valid, but the conclusion false.
Yeah. Do you know Dr. Hugh Ross?
I don't know.
He's a pretty well known astrophysicist. He's a friend of mine that I used to do a show with his organization years ago. He's definitely going to come back on the Non-Sequitur show. I've had a few astrophysicists on over the years. I had ever heard of Dr. Paul Davies?
Vaguely. I need to do. The thing is, I've always got my head in the philosophy, in the sand of philosophy. So
Oppie, obviously. Oppie's great. Oppie, Oppie's fantastic to talk to.
Well, I'm talking to him soon.
Get him to read my paper. I sent it off to Dr. Demi, and Demi said, yeah, he'd be happy to read it, but he said, when he's able to get to it, that was like 2 months ago or 3 months ago, and I haven't got it back. If you could get Oppie to read my paper, I'd be like thrilled. He's been, like I said, he's been on my show. He wouldn't remember, but I really loved it.
Yeah, no, I really liked that. I thought that it was a really interesting discussion.
You know who you should get as a theist? Get John Rasmussen on your show.
Yeah, I want to read his book as well. I think he's got one or two.
Necessary Existence?
Necessary Existence.
Dude, good luck with that.
Yeah. Is it a hard one?
Oh, dude, I can't even get past like the first chapter. I just looked. I'm looking through it, and I'm like, holy, this is a beast. He is a beast.
So is it quite long, or is it just dense?
It's dense. It's modal logic. Okay. It's straight up modal logic.
Okay.
It's very dense.
Maybe I'll need some. God books.
Yeah, and he told me,
then.
he said, "Hey, Steve, I thought after you may have read Necessary Existence, you might become on our side." I'm like, dude, I can't even understand your book to even go on your side. I go, but what I do understand is it's obviously well written. Josh is a brilliant dude, very nice guy. But yeah, he is formidable, man.
Well, I've just started to read Swinburne's God, and already it's that there's a bit of modal logic there, quite a bit. But I think.
Well, Swinburne's interesting because he's one of the very few that will argue God is not a necessary being, but a narrowly logically contingent being.
I can see where that might come from.
Yeah,
the whole origin of, is the idea that something comes from nothing. To me, is logically absurd, and then I think about quantum mechanics. But then I'm like, well, where did the quantum mechanics come from?
Here, look at this way. Look at this way. The talk about ex nihilo, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's absurd to say something can come from nothing. The reason being is it's something that's an unknown. If there's actually nothing, there's no actuality, no potentiality, there's nothing to stop anything from coming from anything, that we have no idea what absolute nothing would even mean. And so you cannot.
We don't even know if it's a thing.
We don't even know if it's possible. Right. It's an unknown. So when somebody says, well, something can't come from nothing, that's just their intuition. That's nothing. There's nothing logically based upon that because we've never been able to experiment with nothing. So we don't even have any idea what it would be. Now, it is shocking to the conscious to think that is nothing even possible? Like, I mean, absolute philosophical nothing.
Not Krauss's nothing.
Yeah, not Krauss's nothing. Yeah. Not to conflate those. And I think Krauss is right on the money on that. I mean, I love something from nothing. I think it's brilliant. But as far as like philosophical nothing, if philosophical nothing is not possible, again, I'm gonna put that in the theist, a little tick in the theist camp. Not like all the way, but if you're gonna just be saying, here's a line, what are you gonna put on the God versus there is no God? If philosophical nothing does not exist, then there always has to be something that goes in the theist category a little bit, because God would be that metaphysical being that always exists. So I mean,
I agree. Yeah, and this is partly the reason why I find it convenient to label myself as agnostic atheist most of the time, because when I say that, I'm kind of admitting from the get-go that I think actually theism has got some.
But that's fine. You can be an atheist and think that. I would label you this. I would just say, look, you're an atheist. You hold the position on all gods, but that doesn't mean there are not some theist arguments that are interesting. Doesn't have to be convincing. Doesn't even have to be majorly compelling. But you can't just hand wave them away.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's like Dawkins does. He gave Pascal's Wade what paragraph in the God Delusion. I mean, Pascal. When I read him, it was actually. I thought it wouldn't be that impressive, but I was actually like, I quite like this.
You know what's even more complicated than that? One, the fine-tuning argument. I watched Malpass and Luke Barnes. Dr. Luke Barnes and Dr. Malpass talk about the fine-tuning. Oh my God, it was amazing. And the other argument...
Heard of Luke Barnes.
He's a nice guy. The other argument that I think people just toss aside too casually is the modal ontological argument for God. They're like, oh, you're just defining God into existence. No. If you don't know like an S5 axiom or understand the different types of axioms in modal logic as far as the K and the relationship to possible worlds, because each modality, each axiom has a certain thing they add to the correlations of possible worlds. They add the transitivity property. They add the reflexivity property. They add the what's some of the other God damn it! Whatever
I can't help you. I can't help you there.
Well, there's one that
you'll have to teach me. Teach me.
If you go to a modal logic checker, there's even little boxes that tells you which one you want to add. And there's one that starts with an A, and I can't think of it with life for me. But it doesn't define it in existence. It actually uses the property that's involved on the S5 modal axiom that if something is possible, then it's necessary that it's possible. Therefore, if it exists in a possible world, it is necessarily the case that it would be existing in all possible worlds as a possibility. It's just an axiom that you can take or leave. You don't have to have that necessary axiom. But by doing though that axiom, it relates all the different possible worlds. I don't know if you've ever done a logic tree where you can close it out. You you do a logic tree and you get to the very, the bottom of the tree and you close it with an X, and if you close all of it, it's valid. Have you ever done that kind of?
I haven't done I've seen a tree.
Okay, I've
only dealt with. Yeah, when I search logic, I guess descriptive is a good word. Instead of equation format, informal logic by. I have to move. Douglas Walton. That's a really good book on logic. Don't know if you've.
Now, most of my logic is just intentional logic and propositional. Modal logic is, like I said, very, very, very complicated. I think people really underestimate how complicated modal logic can get, and once you look into like necessary existence, it's like holy crap. It's like this is mind blowing how complicated because it really does relate to possible world semantics. It all is about possible worlds, and so if you don't really get how these possible worlds are related, none of it's going to make sense because you cannot close out the logic tree and say it's a valid argument. That's how you test if an argument in modality or modal logic is true. You do a logic tree, and then you have to be able to close it out. And the only way you can close it out if you can relate it to other possible worlds. And the only way to do that is by taking certain axioms to do that. And so, if you ever look at the Stanford Encyclopedia on modal logic, you'll see there's different axioms you take or not take. Have you looked at the modal logic on Stanford Encyclopedia? You have like
no, I haven't. I'm yeah.
It'll explain M. It starts out with Kripke's version, which is just M. Then you add axiom 4, axiom 5. They call it S4, S5. But yeah, you check if you want to learn modal logic. Start with SEPs.
I want to try.
It's hard. I look at,
and then I could probably understand your work a bit better as well, or not. Side as well.
Well, I don't use modal logic in that though. That's all propositional. What I use for that is called the square of opposition, which was Aristotelian. So if you can understand the square of opposition and how that relates, like all SRP, no SRP, some SRP, and what you have the subcontraries, the contrary, the subalternations. If you can understand the basic square of opposition, then my argument just kind of flows naturally. And like, oh shit, this is easy. Well,
reading in English.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Everybody that's understood who read my paper go, yeah, this completely makes sense because once you get that basics, it's like, oh shit, this is like reading English. It's not. It looks complicated, but my roommate made, what is that, soup? Oh, my roommate made soup. Cool.
Do you like a bit of?
Yes. Well, it's great for my throat because my throat is really raspy, and I got.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I take my COVID test, so I'm gonna let you go. I know it's late for you, James.
Yeah, nearly. Well, to be fair, when I talk to Graham Offey, it's going to be midnight because
he's in Australia.
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be. I'll have a.
Well, I would love to come on a panel on your channel at any time. I would be thrilled to.
Yeah, it would be great. Yeah, I love this discussion. I like how it's kind of flowed. I feel like kind of philosophy. Definitely with the right person as well. It kind of takes a rhythm of its own, an energy of its own.
My audience love this. Yeah, they love this, and I'm sure we're gonna get some comments on it. So you can find James on his channel, Ahead of the Curve. Link is in the video description. Go check him out. He has great conversation. You are a conversationalist, and that is an art in itself.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with just hearing what people think about things and trying to. I like being the devil's advocate as well, as annoying as it might be to my friends.
Nothing wrong with that if it's done. You know what's so funny? Even if you imply sophistry, but you let people know you're being sophistic, ain't nothing wrong with that. I think when sophistry is employed to deceive, like I've seen presuppositionalists do, then it's not a learning tool; it's a deceptive tool.
And I learn, and to be honest, I learn best, apart from books, of course. I learn best from these kind of discussions, taking on board ideas and testing them out as well. Getting your thoughts on.
For sure. I'm going to send you some stuff and send me what you like me to look in. But I will be after I eat and test. All right, buddy? So I'm going to end, the StreamYards here and then the call.
Thanks everyone for watching. Well, yeah.
Want to promote your channel or anything else? Because I already did, but
no, I think you did an excellent job.
All right, buddy. Very good talk. I'm thrilled for these kind of discussions. I want people to see that people can, agree or disagree, but when you talk about philosophy, it should be on this kind of back and forth. I mean, this to me is a dialogue.
The cross-examination in a debate is always my favorite. I always skip to that. If it's a debate that I quite like, I always skip to cross-examination just to get to the meat of it. Yeah.
Well, that's why I do it too in my debates. I'll have to send you one or two of my debates that I thought pretty good.
Please do. Yeah, no, I want to check out the Krauss one.
Oh yeah,
I didn't know that.
That was great. That wasn't a debate, but it was definitely one of the better discussions I've had because I could definitely tell he was like, "Holy shit!" Here's not some kind of dumb question. I mean, maybe I'm overlooking at it, but I really thought that I saw a change in his demeanor of just, I'm happy to be asked this kind of stuff. So, all right, everybody, go subscribe to him. That's the most important thing. Go subscribe to Shane's on his channel and get him some subs.
Cheers.
All right, guys, cheers, and have a good night tonight.